Hello and welcome to another episode of Muscle for Life. I am Mike Matthews. Thank you for joining me today. If I sound a little bit funny, it's because I have a cold. And I have a cold because I also have a 5-year-old daughter who goes to school with other 5-year-olds. And there always seems to be at least one of them who is at least a little bit sick coming to school because their parents are dickheads. These are the people who go to the grocery store sick and cough on the produce and go to the gym sick and cough on all of the equipment. These are the people who would hide a zombie bite. Anyway, moving on to the topic of today's episode, which is simple ways to make fat loss easier. Because while fat loss is straightforward, it is simply sustaining a calorie deficit over time, consistently eating fewer calories than you burn over time. And if you want to lose primarily fat and not muscle, you also want to eat enough protein. That is all it requires. There are many ways to make that easier or harder. When you get into the details specifically of how to eat, how to exercise, how to supplement, and so forth. And in this episode, you're going to learn about some simple ways to make the process of fat loss a lot easier. Some small changes that you can make to your fitness regimen that can have an outsized impact on your fat loss. The amount of fat that you lose, how quickly you lose it, and how enjoyable the experience is. And today you are going to be learning from Paul Revelia, who I've had on the show before. Paul is a natural bodybuilder and fitness coach, and he is the founder and CEO of ProPhysique, which is a coaching and consulting company that helps people get into great shape. And I wanted to get Paul on the show to talk about this because he not only understands the theory and the science underpinning of what we're going to be talking about, he has a lot of practical, in the trenches, as they say, experience. Paul has been coaching people for over a decade. He's worked personally with thousands and thousands of people, and he has worked with a diverse range of people as well, which is important because somebody who is brand new to all of this stuff, who needs to lose, let's say, 30 or 50 plus pounds to reach a healthy body composition, is very different than somebody who is, let's say, fit, trying to get to super fit. And if you don't know how to meet those people and everyone in between where they are and give them a prescription that they can actually follow, then they are going to fail. And so in this episode, Paul and I talk about the relationship between body fat and body image. We talk about cheat days and why Paul does not recommend them and what he recommends instead. Paul talks about the importance of the right mindset and the right expectations when you are starting a fat loss phase. He also talks about eating out and how he incorporates that into his diet so he can enjoy restaurants and enjoy different types of food without blowing his diet and more.
Mr. Revelia, it's nice to see you again.
What up, Big Mike? Good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I hate to use the word OGs, but I feel like that's us.
I never thought of that, actually. That's a good point. I just the other day, somebody had asked me, so like, how long have you been doing the Mike Matthews thing? 11 years now.
Is it Body for Life? Is that what it's called?
So it started with Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. That was a book that I published back in 2012. And that's how it started for me, was with that book.
And then you did the female version, right?
Yeah. And then I did, because I had a lot of women reading it, and then they would reach out to me and they would want to know if they can do this too, even though they don't really want to. A lot of them are like, bigger is not quite the word that I'm going for, maybe like fitter. But a lot of this stuff seems to be applicable to women, working out calories and macros. And
I get the same comment when I do like a video. Does this work for women too? And I always say, like, there's very little difference between the sexes, like as far as response. Men might respond better, but same principles apply.
Yep. And then, so eventually I was like, I should really take this book and make it as feminine as possible, meaning, okay, all the examples are for women, which is easier for women then to understand because I'm talking about body weights that they can relate to and calorie ranges and macros that actually relate to them, and pull out some of the information that's really just for men, replace it with information that when you're having this type of discussion with women that is going to come up. And so put some of that female specific information in. And then with the programming, it's a bit different just to reflect the differences in priorities for most men versus women.
You're saying women don't want huge pecs? So here's my theory on that. You can literally replace glutes and pecs and it's the same program.
You might maybe a little bit less biceps in the women's program.
Yeah. But guys, not many guys are like, oh, cool, glute day. Like that's not.
Yeah, although I'm seeing more of that. Must be purely driven by social media at this point.
I mean, we're running out of body parts to train. I mean, Brett Contreras basically came along and invented glute training and then like built an industry around it. There's even gyms now that are like glute specific gyms. I'm like, wow, like it's crazy.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I mean, Brett's brand is built around that, but I've seen multiple gyms now pop up that are like, build your glutes, I'm like, wow. Like,
well, it's marketers just taking a trend to its most, I guess it's logical extremes. And then eventually it burns out and then something else pops up.
Oh, there's a gym not too far from my house. Now, I live in Tampa, so I think there's a lot of trendy stuff, that's coming to Florida and around. But it's like they have a machine and you basically join, you go in and you just go through the machines and then you walk out. I'm like, for like busy professionals, I'm like, hey, like there's a market for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it gets people into the gym who maybe otherwise wouldn't do any strength training whatsoever, I guess you could make an argument for it from that perspective, even though it might be kind of goofy from a programming perspective that all you do is train your glutes and maybe you're not even squatting either. It's really just like glute isolation.
Yeah, I definitely think having a physique goal definitely helps every aspect of our lives. I mean, that's something we can talk about if we're going to focus on like lifestyle people, but being in the gym or being active is it's got to be something that everybody does. It just makes life better. Like we were built to move. Like sitting on the couch and driving in a car all day is just not conducive to like a quality life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very modern to be able to get out of bed, shuffle to your closet, put some clothes on, shuffle to your kitchen, shuffle to your car, drive, shuffle to your desk, just sit there all day, shuffle to the bathroom here and there, shuffle back to your car, back to your kitchen, back to your bed, rinse and repeat forever.
Yeah, because those hours where you're working can be exhausting and mentally draining. So you're just waiting to get home to relax. And I think when they started coming out with like step trackers, like the Fitbits and that stuff, that was eye-opening to me. There were some days I was getting like 3,000 steps. I'm like, damn, dude.
That's why I have this bike back here, because I do go on a few walks. I'm probably on formal walks, maybe 45 minutes a day, 30, 45 minutes a day. But I mean, what is that? That's probably 4,000 steps or so. And aside from that, I'm sure I drive to the gym because it's too far to walk to the gym. It's a 10-minute drive. I'm not going to walk an hour or whatever that would be. But and in moving around a little bit in the gym, but that's mostly just strength training. I'm not moving much otherwise. And the rest of my day is kind of sitting here in this chair, corralling kids at night and getting them to bed, and sitting over there on a couch for at least 30 minutes to try to relax before I go to bed.
On the other side of this camera that I'm looking at is my treadmill with a TV. So I walk every day, watch a TV show. And that's my like movement.
Well, let's segue into what I wanted to bring you on to the show to talk about today. And that is, to repeat something that you joked about before we started, to how to get shredded in 6 hours, right? That's today's promise. and step one, I'm guessing, is to start shredded.
Well, so here's, I'm going to give you a little funny story because I think it'll actually explain, because when someone hears the term get shredded in 6 hours, they think 6 hours from now. I don't think that's applicable. I think it's 6 1-hour lessons, right? So I read a book, in the 90s on how to build a website. And it was called Web Design in 24 Hours. And I thought, I'm going to build a website in 24 hours. You don't realize how long 24 hours is. It was 24 separate 1-hour lessons. So you would go through the chapter and you would type on the computer and you would learn some programming, some HTML code, right? And at the end of each hour, you would be building on top of the previous hour. Well, it took me like 2 weeks to complete this. But by the end of it, I could design websites. I mean, this is basic websites before Java and all that nonsense, right? But the hack was like, in my brain, it was 24 hours. So it was like this time tomorrow. No, because you can't do 24 hours straight. So when I joke around about how to get shredded in 6 hours, I'm like, well, if you spent 1 hour going to the grocery store, learning how to scan your food and learning how to be accountable, that's 1 hour of very valuable time. It's not the 6 hours that elapses in the next day. It's literally 6 1-hour lessons that you could then use to get shredded. You make things more palatable for something that seems intimidating. You want 6-pack abs? For some people, that's impossible, right? But you break it down into going like, let's just take this one thing that we're going to do. We're just going to start learning about nutrition. What's in that stuff you eat? Then you see the wheels turning when they start tracking. oh, I didn't realize this had 60 grams of fat in it. I thought it was healthy because it's, it's a muffin or something. I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole, but I think the carb fear is the biggest pet peeve I have, and that this insulinogenic obesity model, which is just ridiculous in my mind because insulin is anabolic. Mike, me and you grew up like people were trying to spike their insulin, right? Post-workout. Like, so for me, insulin is just a hormone that has positive impact.
I think you can possibly even still make an argument that one of the reasons a high carb diet is better for muscle growth over time is the effects of generally higher insulin levels and how that suppresses muscle breakdown rates. But it wouldn't be a major factor, but it certainly is not hurting.
Well, and I think carbohydrates are jet fuel for people that work out. If you've ever gone a couple days of low carbs, you go to pick up a weight, you're like, why is this so heavy? Right. So the idea that insulin is somehow evil, and that a lot of people are passing off this idea that like, oh, if you do a diet low in carbohydrates, you keep your insulin low. False. You can store from fat much easier than from carbohydrates. Your body does not have to convert that to adipose at all. Carbohydrates are actually quite difficult to convert into fat. This notion that one simple thing is the reason you're fat, right? Go through the grocery store aisle and look at the magazine every time you go through, and every week it's a different simple liver detox, lose 35 pounds this month.
If it involves 600 calories of like lemon juice every day, then certainly you can lose a lot of weight.
And I mean, that's ultimately where you see those things fall apart, is they go, well, if you avoid eating all day, your insulin's low, but you're also not eating any calories. That's the reason you're losing weight, not because your insulin isn't present. It's comical to me, but I just think of it as like job security.
Yeah, it's marketing. Some people believe in that model of obesity, but then other people who I would bet are a bit smarter and a bit more educated. Sometimes it's not necessarily intelligence per se. It's just education. Some people are ignorant, not stupid, just ignorant. They just don't know. And I get into, I understand they get into this space and they go on Twitter, and here's some Harvard educated MD who is promoting this model of obesity and explaining it in a way that makes sense and using sciencey terms, and maybe even referring to research that purportedly proves this is how it works. It's understandable that a lot of people, even smart people, are like, okay, sure, I'll give that a go. I mean, this guy has credentials. He's clearly smart. He's well-spoken, seems to be evidence-based. And I'm supposed to just give up a lot of these carbohydrate-rich foods that I like to eat. But sure, I'll try it out. I understand that.
The simple test is ask the person that's afraid of carbs what foods they associate with carbohydrates. And they're usually going to say like some candy, some donuts, some pizza, something like that, when those foods are actually higher in fat than they are in carbohydrates.
I actually just tweeted about this high protein, quote unquote, for people just listening in scare quotes, high protein foods that really shouldn't be labeled high protein foods, like 80-20 ground beef. Yes, it is rich in protein, but it's like 70% of its calories are from fat. And going down the list of quinoa and beans and named off other foods where 70 to 80% of the calories in those foods is carbs plus fat. So yes, they contain nuts, for example. Sure, these foods contain protein, but they're not efficient in terms of grams of protein per, call it 10 calories or whatever kind of arbitrary ratio you want to set.
My first coach gave me a macro plan, right? And the first week I was like, how the hell am I going to figure this out? And it took me literally a week of going on nutrition data websites to look all this stuff up. But I remember the first time I looked up the nutrition information for cheese, I was like, dear Lord, why would I ever eat cheese? Like, look at how much fat is in cheese. That kind of, because I always thought like cheese has a lot of protein.
Avocado is delicious. It's healthy, but it is a lot of calories. If you're eating 1 to 2 avocados per day, you're going to have a hard time losing weight because you're not going to be very full for all of those calories.
Right. Well, like imagine you go to a restaurant and you get chips and guac. Like the chips are fried. The guac is fat. You've had 700-800 calories before your food arrives.
Maybe even before an appetizer. That might just be the...
Oh, yeah. That's the pre-app. I mean... We've all gone to a Mexican restaurant and been full before the food gets there.
Correct. That's exactly what I thought about is the last time I was at a Mexican place with my parents, and it was chips and cheese and guac. And again, that was before any actual plated food.
Throw in a beer.
Yep. Well, why don't we I mean, we're kind of talking obliquely about some points, I'm sure, that are on your list of things that are lifestyle. I mean, you could use the word hacks, talk about marketing buzzwords, whatever, but lifestyle, maybe modifications for effortless fat loss is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but let's just say for easier fat loss. I'm just going to let you go wherever you want with that. You can start with other diet related things, exercise related things, but I just thought it would be a good discussion to talk about, because we can assume that a lot of people listening understand the basics of meal planning. They understand energy balance. They understand why tracking calories or weighing and measuring food can be useful. Maybe you don't want to do it forever, but certainly for a period, it's useful to help calibrate your understanding of proper portions of food. Or if you really need to be precise with your calories, of course, that's the best way to do it. However, what tips would you share for them? Again, things that they can integrate into their cuts that are low effort and low pain that provide maybe disproportionately positive benefits.
Yeah. So I'll think back to when I used to, coach a lot of lifestyle people and essentially like even some that were quite overweight, even be considered obese, because although I'm like in the physique realm, I compete and all that stuff, you got to meet people where they're at, right? I can't give somebody who's never even been in shape a bodybuilding plan. They're going to be overwhelmed and get burnt out too quick. So the first thing I would do would be like, give me a diet recall with no stress on them. I don't want you to change what you're doing and tell them like, I'm not judging. I do not care what you're eating, but just simply doing a diet recall. And what always would come out from that was a lot of people would consume their calories from liquids.
And by recall, do you mean you're just asking them, hey, run me through a normal day?
Yeah. Or just, I'd say, hey, reach back out to me in 3 days. Just start putting in your notes on your phone what you're having. And so like orange juice, a couple Cokes, a couple alcoholic drinks. And I'm like, if we just start getting 0 calories from fluids, that's going to be a big shift, right? So, I think most of us that are like trying to be bodybuilders and are fit, I do not like getting my calories from drinks. Almost all my drinks have 0 calories, right? Unless it's a libation or something. So that's one of the easiest ones is just say, hey, let's just swap out all your drinks for 0 calorie options.
Now, something that people probably ask you, I know they ask me, is diet soda. There's controversy over artificial sweeteners. And so many people will ask, is it okay to have diet soda? Especially people who like soda. So, somebody who really likes to have those 2 or 3 Cokes per day, and going from that to no soda whatsoever just makes things significantly more difficult.
In my experience, diet soda for me is a lifesaver because it gives me some satiety. It's got some sweetness to it. It's obviously, if not 0 calorie, very low calorie. And, as someone who's pretty close with very smart people, there's 0 danger in the consumption of artificial sweeteners. And actually a study just came out that was reported on where they basically equated 0 calorie drinks with other options. And the group that was on the 0 calorie, something like this, actually lost more weight. The false reporting out there is that it makes you hungrier.
Yeah. Or it makes you crave sweet things. People will say that as well.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. I mean, but then again, I'm also including things that are sweet in my diet as I need them, right? So I'm not avoiding. And I think maybe that's where there might be some issues. So that's why I won't even talk about what foods to avoid early on with a person who's just trying to get started. That's the fear everybody has. Oh, to lose weight, I got to eat chicken and broccoli and I can never have pizza again. I think that's the rabbit hole they go down where they don't even want to try. Whereas you go, no, you can have pizza. You just can't have the whole pizza or every day have a pizza, right? And so then you start to work on that. So for me, the diet sodas are kind of a placeholder between my meals, but that's typically the leaner I get. Hunger signals kind of pick up. Another one would be like the rate of fat loss. I've had people check in and be down 3 pounds in a week and be severely disappointed. Well, my friend lost 10 pounds because they cut out carbs. And I have to explain to them that they did not lose 10 pounds of body fat. They lost 10 pounds of mostly fluid retention, a lot of that intramuscular, and that now they're not going to lose any more weight and they're going to feel like garbage. Helping them understand the actual process and process what's happening really helps with fat loss. setting realistic expectations, which is why I love doing the YouTube videos, because I can show the journey of a person that took multiple years to lose 100 pounds, but they're keeping it off. That first one of just being accountable with what's going in your mouth with beverages is huge. My next one would be if you can get them to walk. So, I mean, if someone's really overweight, they don't want to set foot in a gym. They're going to be like maybe embarrassed, or maybe they're not even physically fit to go in a gym, but they should be able to walk. And if you can start somebody walking, that benefits their digestion, that reduces their hunger, that can also increase their, right now, everyone's going through this phase of like mental health and mental wellness. Walking is wonderful for that. It can be time for you to like reflect. There's just so many benefits to walking. And so those two things alone can really have a huge impact on just getting someone to do it. And then it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go for a walk for an hour every time you do it. You can, every time you eat a meal, do a little 10-minute walk, right? Stand Efforting made a great video about that years ago, how it improves digestion and just keeps your energy higher. You don't get the crash after a meal if you get up and take a 10-minute walk. So, I used to work in an office.
Getting out in the sun too is good for helping manage your circadian rhythm. It's just good to talk about mental health. It's kind of cliche these days, but it really does give you a little boost in your mood to get outside, get some sun on your skin, look at some trees.
Yeah, depending on where you live, the more time you can spend outside, the better. I mean, I'm fortunate to live in Florida where, when I go outside, it's usually nice. And if I really want to go outside, I can drive over to the beach, and there is just something beneficial about being near the water or near the beach it just feels good. And I think we do lose that. We lose, from the time we're kids, we're on our bikes, we're outside running around, and then our lives tend to become more and more indoors as we age, right? Responsibilities, jobs, very few of us work outside. Taking some time for that is a huge part of, making this journey or making this process of changing your body composition much more palatable for the average person. Like, it doesn't have to be like you take these huge steps. You can just start adding multiple little things and then realizing, okay, now I'm seeing the benefit of my efforts. And then they'll start to say, well, what else can I do, coach? Like, what's the next thing after this? And that's when we can get into digging. But those first two things, and then just learning some accountability, I mean, you can get people in great shape just doing those things.
Let's go back to the rate of fat loss. What advice do you have for people in terms of setting the right expectations? And do you differentiate between the beginning phase of a cut and then middle end phase in terms of approach, expectations? For example, the reason why I ask this is I wouldn't say it's so much of a debate. There's just an ongoing discussion because there's a lot of individual preference here of what is the best way, or even if we say to specific people, finding the best way for you to manage a cut. Would it be more appropriate for certain people to start out very aggressively? And an argument for that could be, okay, if somebody's very overweight, they can lose multiple pounds of fat per week and feel fine. It might look like a starvation diet from the outside, but if it's set up appropriately and it's not continued for too long, then you just get a lot of fat loss really fast, which is motivating. And then you move into the middle phase, which is less aggressive. But then some people will argue against that and say, no, you should really never try to maintain a 1,000 calorie deficit every day, or even maybe more extreme in the case of like protein sparing modified fasting. And you should always just go for something that is sustainable for the long haul. What are your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, I think the first rule is you can never say always. You have to meet people where they're at and where they're at mentally. My company does a 90-day transformation challenge because I feel like 90 days is kind of a magic window where people can go all in for 3 months, right? And then once you get them to make a transformation, once you give them a community, once you give them a goal date, that's really going to be powerful. I think the most important thing is having a deadline. The idea of like, I want to lose some weight by the summer. Not going to happen. Give yourself a date. Give yourself a deadline. You and I have done photo shoots and bodybuilding competitions and these kind of things where like you get up in the morning and you have a purpose to your day. If you wake up in the morning and your purpose is just like, I want to lose some weight over the next couple months, sorry, you can start that journey tomorrow. You can worry about that. That's next week's problem, right? So how aggressive you start, it just depends on the person. Like if they are very overweight, you can be in a more aggressive caloric deficit because they're going to burn more calories. Somebody that weighs 300 pounds just going for a walk is probably going to burn more calories per hour than a 130-pound person running a marathon, right? Their bodies are just going to be much less efficient. But, it diminishes. And the way I like to start my fat loss journeys when I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show, I don't start off day one in contest prep thinking like, I'm going all in. I start whittling down my window, right? I start eating less junk. I start taking more walks. I start being a little more accountable. And then as weight loss gets harder, I get more and more accountable until I get to the end where I'm damn near perfect with my meal timing, my supplements, my sleep, right? But I don't start off like that. The focus narrows as you lose body fat. And you got to remember, it's all relative. You have less body fat to lose. You're going to lose less body fat. But 1 pound of fat loss at the end of a diet has more visual difference than the first 20 or 30 pounds, right? You can literally start to see every little thing in your body changing. So it gets more exciting the leaner you get. But for those first few months or weeks, it can be more about the scale. You're like, yes, I'm down 5 pounds. You might look in the mirror and think, I don't see it, but you can see it on the scale. So when people tell me that the scale is not a valuable tool, I say, it's one of the, I use pictures, measurements, and the scale. Those are the 3 things at my disposal. At the end of a diet, the scale might not be the most important thing because fluid fluctuations, muscle soreness, all these things for women, their cycle. But at the beginning, yes, you should absolutely be seeing the scale make significant changes, especially if you're over 20% body fat.
And I agree with that. And I've seen many people on social media place all of the focus on just establishing the right habits and eschewing any and all forms of measuring anything. I think that's a mistake, just a psychological mistake, because it's motivating to see, and I've seen it, and you've seen it working with so many people. I've seen it working with so many people over the years. It's motivating for somebody to start out very overweight. And when they lose 5 pounds, as you said, they see no difference in the mirror and their clothes fit more or less the same, but they know that they're moving in the right direction because they saw it on the scale. And that's motivating. Eventually, they may not need the scale anymore because they get to a point where they actually are just looking in the mirror, taking pictures, looking at those every week or two, paying attention to how their pants are fitting.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, it is a big, but it actually is, as you know, it's a pretty good indicator of body fatness. If your waist is shrinking, you are getting leaner.
Oh, if you have to go to the store and buy bigger pants, that's a problem. Like that's an indicator. There is no
you're just getting fatter. If you're okay with that, then that's great. But just know that's what's happening. It's not bloating.
There's no waist muscle. You're not big boned. You are getting fatter. I think the first time I ever dieted, actually, I pictured myself, I played college baseball. I was into bodybuilding. And after about a decade after college, I saw myself in a picture and my face was round and I was like 240 pounds. And I thought, God, I look terrible. Like I just don't look healthy. And I've never seen it. Sometimes it took that picture to shock me because in my mind, I was an Adonis, but pictures told me otherwise. And so I was like, yeah, let's tighten this back up.
That's interesting you say that. I think of a study that showed it was on the reasons that people make drastic lifestyle changes. And this was related to body composition. One of them was seeing a picture of them and being shocked or horrified. Like for some reason, seeing a picture gave them perspective that they just didn't have looking in the mirror every day, because we look at ourselves in the mirror every day. And
it's so gradual in the mirror, like, because you see yourself every single day, multiple times per day. So yeah, it is a very gradual process. Even fat loss is gradual in the mirror. Like,
yeah, I was just going to say that it can work against us. Even, I don't know if I'm sure you've experienced this because you've gotten super lean. And unfortunately, that's the curse, right? Once you've been super lean, anything but that. But I'm sure you've experienced where what you see in the mirror, you nitpick and you're not very happy with, but then you see a picture of you for whatever reason, maybe your shirt's off and you're like, actually, I look pretty good. Or you see a picture of you at that time later when you were not very happy with what you saw in the mirror. And later you're looking back going, what was I saying? I looked great.
I've talked about this before. I think there's an inverse relationship. When you have more body fat, you focus on your positives. Oh, I'm stronger. My shoulders look bigger. My chest looks bigger. The leaner you get, you focus on the negatives. Oh, I have lower back fat. Probably the most common comment I get on my YouTube channel or direct messages, because I answer questions in there, is like, hey, I've lost 30 pounds and I'm like 16, 17% body fat. How do I get to this next thing? Now that they've lost all this weight, they're like, wait a second, I still don't look what I wanted to look like. And they've got to go through that next phase. And so understanding that the body composition that you see of someone that's like lean, that is way lower weight and less body fat than you imagine. We walk around with, more body fat than we think. And, that's something that I've learned to deal with because I've gone through it now so many times for competing that I'm very comfortable in both. But the first time I went through that, it was very tough to like see the body fat go back on. And like you said, I would take pictures during the diet and think, God, I look terrible. And then months later, I would look back and be like, man, I was messed up. I thought I looked bad on this day, right? Like, because all I saw was that one little spot on my lower abs that still has some fat there. I didn't see the whole picture.
Or the vein going up your abs seems to have ended a little bit lower than the other week.
Yep. Yeah, no, you only see the flaws the leaner you get. To a degree, you tend to focus more on the positives the more body fat you have. So, you and I know this. Fat loss is more of a psychological battle than anything else. Everybody here knows what to do to lose weight. If I told you that your dog needs to lose 10 pounds, what are you going to do? Take him for more damn walks and don't let him eat table scraps. That's what we got to do. But human beings are much more complicated than dogs. So we have to like understand the psychology of fat loss for that reason.
Or we need a master to regulate our food intake, and then it's not up to us anymore. If we were in a gulag work camp, then we would be super shredded.
Oh, I mean, those studies from the 50s that they don't even allow them to do anymore, the Minnesota starvation experiment's the most famous one. I mean, they were trying to figure out how to make people healthy that were in the concentration camps and had been starved near death. They were trying to figure out what to do with them once they came out. And so they literally put these people on like 1,200 calorie diets and made them work 12 hours a day. And these people, like, you wouldn't even be allowed to do this study anymore. But what they learned from that study was just amazing. People's mental focus shifted. A bunch of the people that were in there like escaped to get out of the study. Some of the people became professional chefs after they changed careers. Like, it literally changes who you are when you lose a lot of body fat.
If I remember, at least one of the participants like severely injured himself to get out, like mutilated his finger or something. No, he like inflicted a pretty serious injury to himself just to get out. And for people listening, if you're not familiar with this study, these men volunteered for this as well, because I mean, you could say that it wasn't exactly their freedom of choice here, because they had two choices. One was they could ship overseas and fight, or two was they could go be a prisoner of war in this study. And I'm guessing the third choice was go to prison or something. So there really were just two choices. But these men did say, all right, fine, I'll go. You can starve me and work me for 6 months or however long it lasted, because I don't want to go die in a ditch somewhere in Europe.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously those kind of studies, they can't do them anymore, but the most valuable studies are studies like that where they're under controlled conditions. When you ask someone to tell you what they ate or what they did, you're trusting that person. But all the studies that are done in like metabolic wards where they feed them and anytime they exercise, they track their calories burned, those are where you get a lot of the insight. They're also very, very expensive to perform those.
And at this point, there's not a good argument for the need to perform more of them. We have enough of that data. What are we going to learn by spending a lot of resources to do it again?
Well, and honestly, as a coach, going through it myself so many times, and then also going through it with clients over the last decade, I've amended how I do things. I've amended how I talk to my clients, put it in my content. We've got a staff of 30 coaches now that we're meeting people where they are. So we're understanding more of the psychology. It's not just here's a plan, good luck. It's creating a community. There's a lot of aspects to changing your life that we don't really take into account for the most part that are so important. The community aspect is huge because most of us don't have someone in our life that is going to support what we're trying to change, right? So for my first time dieting down for a bodybuilding show, I didn't have someone in my immediate presence. Luckily, the internet was coming along then, and I was on these message forums, bodybuilding.com forums, and talking to people. And so it was like I would look forward to updating them on my progress, and I would look forward to seeing their progress. And I didn't realize it at the time. I wasn't consciously going, cool, I'm in this community. It was more like it kept me motivated, right? Because I was checking in with someone other than myself on a weekly basis. And I didn't want to be like, oh, sorry, guys, I had a crap week, so contest prep isn't going well. I was excited to see how those people were doing. I've tried to recreate that environment that's what our 90-day challenge is about, because bodybuilding.com used to have an amazing transformation challenge every year. they would get hundreds of thousands of people in it. That provides a platform for people to talk to each other. Like, for our transformation challenge, we have a private group and they're supporting each other. They're posting pictures. They're sharing meal ideas. They're saying, hey, I know you had a rough week, but keep going. And I've done podcasts with the winners of my challenge afterwards. And it's not the diets we provide, which are great. We provide vegan and blah, blah, blah. It's not the training programs. People know how to work out. They always say the most valuable tool was the community of like-minded people, of like, I had a bad day, but I knew I had to go in there and talk about it. And then they got support. And so I think, obviously we're living in a more modern time where it's less necessary to be in a community, but it's probably more important than ever. So, like I said, like with the dog situation, we know walk more, eat less. If you tell a person to move more and eat less, you might make them more depressed because the time that they eat might be with their friends, right? And the time that they're playing video games on their phone or on their video game devices might be their time to be social. So you're going to create depression, right? So you've got to find ways to give people support towards their goals.
How do you help people through the difficulties of people close to them who are not supportive or who even seem to be trying to sabotage, or at least that is the net effect of what they say and how they behave toward this person who's working to make a change?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes we change. We go through, I definitely had a different group of friends. Not that they aren't my friends anymore, but, when I decided to start dieting down and doing bodybuilding competitions, my social circle definitely changed because that's who I was spending more time with, was the people that wanted to go to the gym, that were interested in tracking their diet. I still had my friends and I'm still friends with all those people, but you start to shift. And if you have somebody that's very close to you and they are causing problems with you, I've seen many people leave relationships and this and that. So sometimes when we grow as people, we have to leave the situations that were keeping us down. Again, that's a very personal discussion from situation to situation. I've worked with people that, like, their wives hated that they did bodybuilding. And I'm like, man, it's just not going to go well if the person you're closest with hates what you do every day.
Yeah, because inevitably that turns into hating you as an individual. I mean, you can't get away from that.
Sometimes you can have a really good heart-to-heart conversation. My wife knows, okay, the last couple of weeks before a bodybuilding show, I'm going to be a little bit selfish. So sometimes we'll plan a vacation for a few weeks after my last show of the season and go, we're going to go on an all-inclusive vacation and just have some fun and get away, because I don't like the word balance. I think that gets thrown around too much. You've got kids, you've got a business. There's no such thing as balance, man. But there can be harmony. There can be periods where you are more focused on one thing than the other, but because of the communication and, your people closest to you and you explaining yourself, you can absolutely have harmony with all those phases. And this is where coaching comes in. Like, this is what coaches do. They work with people on this aspect of the process. It's not just like, here's your diet, good luck. It's, no, let's have a conversation and maybe I can give you some pointers. We actually have a mental health specialist on our staff. So if I have a client that's struggling with eating issues, with motivation, I'll set the phone call up for them and they'll get on and, I'll find out really what's going on with them if they're not willing to open up to me.
If you like what I'm doing here on the podcast and elsewhere, please do consider supporting my sports nutrition company, Legion, because while you don't need supplements to build muscle, lose fat, and get healthy, the right ones can help. And that's why over 350,000 discerning fitness folk have chosen Legion. Well, there's that, and there's our 100% natural products, our clinically effective ingredients and doses, and our no-hassle money-back guarantee. But wait, there's more, because right now Legion is holding its big annual spring sale. We do this once per year, and that means you can save up to 50% on some of our most popular products, including our protein powders, our pre-workout, our post-workout, our fat burners, multivitamin, joint support, and more. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, skedaddle on over to buylegion.com, BUYlegion.com, and take advantage of the savings before something that you might want runs out of stock. I know, but seriously, every big site-wide sale we do, Legion does a few of them per year, results in at least a flavor or 2 or 3, or a product variation or 2 or 3 running out of stock. And we've tried to prevent that from happening with fancy software that does fancy analyses, but those analyses were never right. And so now we've just accepted it. We do our best to keep everything in stock, but every single time there's some inexplicable surge in demand for certain flavors, certain variations. And so all of that is to say, again, just head over to buylegion.com, lock in your order, lock in your savings, and enjoy. Let's talk a bit about dieting, specifically planning and tracking people who that maybe they even open up with, they don't want to plan or track.
I saw this years ago and it just always stuck in my head. There's one thing that people do that are successful in losing weight and keeping it off. One thing that they do that other people don't do. That is, they plan their meals in advance. They've got their meals set aside. So they're not waiting until they're hungry, going to the fridge or driving through somewhere and getting food. They already know what their next meal is. And, you and I know what it looks like. It's a Tupperware full of, in the fridge, we've got chicken, we've got steak, we got potatoes, we got rice, we got eggs. At any moment, I can go downstairs and make myself a meal, or I already have it made, or I can work with a company like Icon Meals who, sponsors me. So I get free meals. So there's lots of great food companies out there. The nice thing about Icon is they ship it to your door flash frozen, but that's the solution, right? So if you can't afford to get your meals sent to you, you can learn to cook. But that's really the simplest way to make it successful, is to actually have your meals planned ahead. Because like you said, it can be stressful. I even get stressed out when I'm trying to hit my macros for the day and I don't know what I'm going to eat. When we're busy and I can just run downstairs, grab a meal, come upstairs, eat it while I'm reading something, man, that makes my day so much less stressful to not have to think about food. So a lot of reducing the stress of fat loss is preparation. Be ready in advance for any situation. Bring protein powder and beef jerky with you to the airport. If you're going to a city that you don't know what the food's going to be like, or a work conference, go to iconmeals.com and have some food delivered to your hotel or to your Airbnb. I can't tell you how easy that makes things to not have to think about food, because we all got to eat. And once you're hungry, all bets are off, man. There's been many times where I'm so hungry, I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to Wendy's.
It's funny. I just recently, I had the same thought. I thought it was just kind of funny, given how long I've been living this kind of lifestyle. So I tend to eat the same stuff every day. It's stuff I like. And when something gets boring, I just make a change. But I don't mind eating more or less the same types of meals for long periods of time, so long as I still enjoy it every time. Once I am forcing myself to finish the vegetable slop dinner that I made, all right, it's time to change. It's time to change something. So there were a couple of times, just because of circumstances in the last couple of weeks, where I wasn't able to eat what I normally eat. And I had to stop and think, like, all right, so what am I going to eat then? And do I want that? Not really. Do I want this? I guess I could do this. That's kind of a weird dinner. And it just occurred to me, imagine going through that. According to one study, the average person makes upward of 200 decisions per day related to food. So, I was just thinking about, imagine going through this. Yes, no, maybe this, maybe that. Do I really want that? Oh, I really want that. But no, it's too many calories. Is it too many calories though? Like, just going through that multiple times every day, that costs energy.
Well, and that's fatiguing. And I think, this is something that our mental health specialist talks a lot about, is that decision-making can be fatiguing. And when do most people lose their diet? Nights and weekends, right? When the fatigue has just set in and you don't want to think and you don't want to act, right? So that's when you need to have your meals planned out. How many times have you been in a diet and you walk in the kitchen and in the pantry and you don't even realize you've done it? You're just standing in there going, what am I doing here? So if you don't have that next meal planned,
just scanning the pantry.
and you'll convince, I've done it. We've all done it. I've convinced myself that, what? No, I need a burger and fries. I need some good fats to help my diet, whatever. You start to convince yourself of the things you need. And so you'll go through those phases. But if you have a meal down there ready to eat that's on target and something you enjoy, and, maybe you can, this is something that happens to me every time I diet down, and I do it every couple of years. I diet down and get on stage. I have something that I just get attached to. Like every prep, there's been a little different meal that I'm like, I remember one prep, it was like I would end of the day every night for like 6 months, I would make an egg white omelet with lean ground beef, put some salsa on it. And I could not wait to eat that every day for 6 months. And I have not had it since.
It makes me think of pregnant women who have stories like that. There's some weird thing that they just have to have.
Yeah, because we've got 3 kids, and I tell my wife the only time that I can relate to what it's like to be a woman is when I'm like 5% body fat. I'm cold, I'm moody, like I'm in and out, my hunger moods, you get hangry.
You have to have your egg white omelet or your entire week is ruined.
Oh, like if you go in the fridge to make your egg white omelet and someone is eating your egg whites, that is a cause for a fight, but not for normal people. Normal people would not do that. But of course we would, like, what are you, crazy? You ate my egg whites? That's my last meal. They didn't know that, you psycho. But, it makes sense in the moment.
What about quote unquote cheat meals or cheat days? What are your thoughts on off-plan eating and right and wrong ways to go about it?
Yeah. So the way I like to rephrase it as a free meal, because the term cheat right there implies like, okay, I'm off my plan. Let's just go hard.
I went with something that rhymes. I went with treat. Let's call it a treat.
Yeah, I like treat. The thinking is, and because I've never really had eating disorder behavior, so I didn't understand it at first. When I would have a client tell me like, oh, coach, I was off my plan on Friday, so I just went ahead and ate like a jerk for 3 days and figured I'll get back on track on Monday. And I would always ask them, why don't you just have that meal? And they'd say, well, because I know that once I'm off my plan, I got to get back. So I'm just going to get it all in until I go back on my plan. So it's the mindset of like, oh, I'm not on my plan. So really learning to reframe that there are no bad foods, that we can be flexible, that we can eat whatever we want within the realm of hitting our daily goals, or sometimes it's even a 2-day goal or a weekly goal, right? Like not trying to be perfect every 24 hours can really help change the way people think about food. So the free meal, the idea is that we're going to focus on something that we're craving. And I'll tell them, go out and what are you craving? And, oh, I really want a burger and fries. Cool. I want you to go have a burger and fries. Don't track it. Replace your last meal. And then tomorrow just get back on track. But the rule is you end it there. Okay. Don't have a burger and fries and then also stop and get a piece of cake on the way home. And then
So then the day would be a treat day would be a bad idea as well, where it starts with, well, I want to have the pile of pancakes for breakfast, and then I want to have the burger and fries for lunch, and then I want to have the wings and beer at dinner, and then I want to have the dessert. And
I mean, it depends on where they're at in the process, but I mean, I think people underestimate how quickly you can put on body fat, especially if you've been dieting for a long time. Our bodies basically become a fat storage machine. Your hormones, your hunger. At that point, depending on where you're at in the diet, I don't know, you can back this up. There are times when I'm dieting where I eat a meal and it makes me hungrier and angrier than I was before the meal. That's not a good place to be when you have a free day. I've never tried the 10,000 calorie challenge because I don't have that big of an appetite, but I promise you I could probably crush 20,000 calories at the end of a prep because your hormones and your hunger signals are so out of whack that eating does not provide satiety. It actually increases the hunger.
I've experienced that just being not stage lean, but maybe photo shoot lean, maybe 7% body fat or so, where even I was impressed with how much food I could eat in one sitting without feeling stuffed. Like what it took just to make me feel full was ridiculous. It was like a joke around the office. It was between me and another guy who also at that time was quite lean. And we would have eat-offs when we'd like all go out and eat as a group because the amount of food that it took for me to actually be like, all right, I'm not stuffed, but I'm definitely not enjoying the food anymore. And I'm definitely full was several thousand calories. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's really the danger in the full day cheats. And I used to get concerned. I don't really have this issue anymore because I have some tools in my toolbox when I'm getting people shredded to set them up for success when the diet's over. But prior to that, I would have a lot of people get on stage or get to their photo shoot or, do their transformation challenge and say, I just want to eat intuitively for a couple of weeks. And I knew I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks. You're going to be up 15 pounds and you're going to be sad. I've developed some tools to help people before they reach their goal. Things like diet breaks and, refeed days really set people up for success once the diet's over. And don't go to an all-inclusive or go on a cruise the day after your diet. Like don't put yourself in that situation.
Can you speak to the refeed in particular you can also cover diet breaks briefly if you'd like, or depending on time, I have one or two other questions I'd like to ask you before we sign off. People can also, I've written and recorded some stuff on diet breaks, but if you want to briefly describe how you go about that, and then refeeds in particular and how the refeed differs from the treat meal?
Yeah. So a refeed is a planned day, and this is the way I frame it, of increased carbohydrates. So when you're getting leaner, dieting down, getting shredded, carbohydrates are the biggest variable. And so once carbohydrates begin to become restricted, you can suffer performance in the gym. So instead of a free day where someone might eat extra fat, I want to focus on restoring muscle fullness so that we're not losing muscle. It's typically a day or 2 days per week where we're increasing carbohydrates quite a bit, but focusing on just that. And then we might even be lowering fats and protein a little bit to kind of account for that. But for the most part, it's just a controlled increase in carbohydrates. And before anybody gets excited, that doesn't mean donuts and pizza. That means potatoes, rice cakes. In some instances, I'll even use kids cereal or candy.
Bread, pasta.
Pasta has a ton of protein. So if you up your pasta, sometimes you take away some steak or chicken. So it really comes down to personal preference. But yeah, I mean, I'm Italian. I love my pasta. But yeah, that's essentially what a refeed is. What a diet break is, it's not a break from dieting. It is a break from being in a deficit. And if you've ever dieted down and gotten shredded, it becomes fatiguing. Low body fat, you're doing a lot of cardio at times, low calories. It can kind of drain you, and you'll just reach a breaking point where even though you should be losing body fat, you're not, because you start to really conserve energy. Your digestion becomes a problem. Hormonally, you become a problem. A diet break is where I bring calories up. It'll be up to maintenance. It might be, 30% increase in calories, probably going to be in the form of a lot of carbohydrates. Cardio will drop as much as 50%. And we just want to maintain kind of our homeostasis for the week. But what happens is sleep improves, recovery improves, digestion improves, hormones improve. And most of my clients, especially the closer they are to stage weight, will actually drop weight during a diet break. So it's not that they necessarily lost fat, although it might be a little bit of that. It's that they dropped some inflammation, their sleep improved. So their metabolic markers are picking up at the same time that we're still being very diligent. And we might even still be in a slight deficit, but mostly because the things that are improving around the diet, because that calories in, calories out equation, what people don't understand is the calories out equation is so dynamic. Calories in is simple, just what you eat. Calories out is impacted by your hormones, by your digestion, by your NEAT, by your sleep. So when you improve all those little funny things, the calories in seems like, wow, I should not be dropping weight. I'm eating more and moving, doing less cardio, but you're actually burning more calories. So that's a very nuanced part. That is not something that I typically will see with a lifestyle client. But, when that Matador study came out, there does seem to be a benefit for people that are very consistent with their diet and cardio, that you can give them breaks throughout a fat loss phase. And I find it sets them up for a lot more success than just grinding through.
Yep. And cardio is one of the last things I wanted to ask you about. We've spoken about walking, and that's obviously a good place to start. Probably you could just say a good foundation of cardio is get out there and get outside and walk. The 10,000 step target is more just marketing than anything else, but it's not a bad target. It represents like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours max of walking. In addition to that, though, what about cardio workouts, in a formal sense, doing cardio to speed up fat loss?
The word cardio has a bad connotation with it, but the definition of cardio is just a rhythmic exercise that increases your resting heart rate. So walking is cardio, right? But the most calories we burn throughout the day is in the form of NEAT, or non-exercise activity, right? So when you're losing body fat, sometimes you'll start to conserve energy in other areas of your life. You might get up from your desk less. You might stop playing ping pong. You don't even realize it.
Park closer to the entrances, and sometimes you would take the stairs. Right now you're like, I'll just take the elevator.
So that's why I love the step trackers, because now it's accountability for your movement. Because the worst thing you can do is tell someone to do more cardio, but then they just augment that by doing less basketball. They're like, I've got another half hour of cardio to do, so I'm just going to stop playing basketball. Well, you're just wasting your time. So with accountability, you can probably lose weight without actually doing cardio if you love to do something like basketball, if you like to play frisbee golf, or if you like to just get out and move. Cardio is just a tool to create a caloric deficit along with your diet, right? So I think the idea when I hear people say like, you shouldn't do cardio to lose weight. Well, I could never get shredded without cardio. I could not eat low enough calories to get shredded. The cardio helps me create that deficit. And having tried it all different ways, I've done the high intensity cardio. I've done all these things. The walking for me is just, it reduces the risk of injury. It's easy to do. And if you can make it easy, like I have it in my house, I would much rather eat more and move more than do no cardio and just be on starvation macros.
And there's research to support the benefits of that approach too. Energy flux, I'm sure you've spoken about that, and we don't have to get into the details here, but the takeaway really is that for the purposes of maintaining your body composition, preserving muscle and just maintaining your health and maintaining your sanity, it is best to eat as much food as you can and move as much as you can and use that movement to drive to create that calorie deficit. That's just a far superior approach to moving a lot less and being like, well, I'll just eat a lot less. You certainly are going to lose fat, but it's going to be a much harder experience and you might lose more muscle doing it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, anyone that tells me like, well, I'm eating 1,200 calories and I'm not losing weight, you're either not tracking that or once a week, you're just having a 5,000 calorie day. And so you're just spinning your wheels because instead of having a moderate approach of say 1,700 calories, you're just getting the same amount of calories in a week as someone who's on 1,700, but you're just getting them all at once.
Yeah, the selective memory comes into play where they're quick to remember the 1,000 calorie Mondays and they conveniently forget about the 5,000 calorie Saturdays.
Yeah, like eating is mindless. We associate eating with certain things. Like some people will eat when they're in their car. Some people will eat while they're talking to a friend. And so when you start tracking with an app or like writing things down, there's been days where I was like, oh, I forgot that I had that bag of chips. Man, like it's so easy to just eat something and move on and just completely erase it from your memory. So that's where the accountability really comes in.
Especially when you have food all around, right? Especially with kids, you have to have food ready for, at least that's how it is here, for their lunch boxes every day. And so the fridge is all, it's even though it's nutritious stuff for the most part, but still like, oh, there's a bunch of cut strawberries. That looks pretty good. There's a bunch of blueberries. That looks pretty good. There's some hard-boiled eggs. And then there's some snacks in the pantry and you can't get away from it.
I'm not proud. I give my kids Oreos and Pop-Tarts because my kids are active as all get out. So like, I'm not throwing away a Pop-Tart if I'm not in prep. I'm going to finish that sucker. So being the family Hoover definitely changes things. That's why, honestly, I have to kind of tell myself I'm in prep or I'm dieting to not do those things. I have to have a reason. A lot of that's what it comes down to. What is your reason for dieting? That's why I like the deadline, because without that deadline, that's tomorrow's problem. That's tomorrow Paul's problem. I'm going to eat the Pop-Tart today. I'll figure the rest out tomorrow.
I'll just do some more cardio.
No, I think the mentality of overeat over cardio, that's a big common thing, especially with competitors. They're like, well, I'll just eat this today and I'll just work it. And the worst thing that can happen is they start to lose weight doing that because that is a slippery slope.
Then it kind of reinforces the behavior.
Yeah, it reinforces that okay, I can just eat this and I just outwork it tomorrow. But there comes a point where you cannot outwork binge eating behaviors. And then even if you reach your goal, now you've got this association with binge eating that can be very detrimental for your long-term mental health. I've had clients come to me that were on such restrictive plans that they would hide in their pantry and eat so that their husband wouldn't see because they were embarrassed that they were off their plan. And their husband wouldn't have given a crap, but they felt guilt eating in front of someone because they knew that they were supposed to not be eating that.
So we're coming up on an hour, but I had one more question.
Oh, I'm good for another 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So, well, then maybe we can fit in the last two scenarios that I wanted to get your thoughts on. One is eating out, which is, again, something everybody, at least new-ish to this, struggles with at some point.
Yeah, my rules for having someone eat out is I try to get them to look up the nutrition information for something they want before they go. Sometimes trying to decide in the moment is stressful. The waiter's in a hurry. The kids are acting up.
And especially if you're on your phone trying to figure out, wait, what is this, 1,000 calorie meal or is it a 500 or a 2,000? I have no idea.
I will say most restaurants now, we went to a place in Tampa the other day called Rock and Brews, me, the wife, all the kids. And I was like, great, Rock and Brews, what are they going to have that fits my diet? Oh, they had grilled chicken, broccoli, and rice. They had a low calorie menu and it was actually good. So I just went right to the low calorie section on the menu. So if you don't have it planned out and it's kind of, on the fly, you can also just ask for simple things like no oil, no butter. I still season the hell out of things with salt and pepper and all that stuff. So you don't have to have bland food, but oils and butters, that's where and cheese, that's where you get a really a lot of calories from that. The fat calories add up so quick and they're not going to fill you up much. So eating out, I try to encourage people to do that, especially if they're not against the deadline for a bodybuilding show. If they're just in a phase of fat loss, because what I want to happen is I want them to learn the behavior of I can still be social, because I don't want them to associate fat loss with suffering. Let's make fat loss inclusive. Also, they can then have a positive impact on the people around them. Because you and I both know when you lose weight, people around you start to go, "Oh, what are you doing to lose weight? Are you doing keto?" And you're like, "No." "Are you avoiding carbs?" "No, I'm just tracking my macros." "So you can eat these chips and a diet soda?" "Yes." And then they go, "Oh, okay, maybe I could do that," right? So if I'm encouraging them to make a change, they might then become the person in their social circle that shows other people how it's done. For me, eating out is, I try to cut it out the closer I get to stage lean, just because the unpredictable nature of just because it says it's this many calories, whatever the chef decided to do that day is not up to you. I start to make all my own food the leaner I get. But if I'm just trying to maintain or lose a couple pounds, I'm going to go to Chipotle and just avoid sour cream and cheese and get my nice steak bowl. Am I a couple hundred calories off? Who cares? I'm still being accountable. So it just depends on meeting that person where they're at in their phase.
Yeah. In that point of how close to your daily target, your daily caloric target, are you trying to be? I'm guessing that if you were missing it by a couple hundred calories, let's say 200 to 300 calories consistently, you would want to rein it in. But if it's here and there, who cares? Again, especially if you're more flexible with either your deadline or how you need to look by your deadline. To your point, there's a big difference between wanting to be beach ready or summer ready and stage ready. Totally different.
Yeah. And some people, they did a really interesting study where they took a group of people and they force fed them an extra 400 calories a day. And a couple of people actually lost weight. And they went, "What the hell? Why did you lose weight?" Well, they just became more active. Their NEAT went up. So they were actually it gave them more energy to do more stuff. So they were just burning it off. Some people would say, "Oh, they have a great metabolism." The longer I've been doing this, the more I've realized that no one has a great metabolism. They move more. A metabolic rate is just a function of how many calories you burn throughout the day. You can bring your metabolism down by low calorie dieting and terrible lifestyle habits. But, the times that we associate we had a really good metabolism, we were just moving a lot. Why did we have a good metabolism in high school? Because we got dropped off at school. We walked from class to class. We had PE. We might have walked home, went and played with our friends after school. We ate whatever we wanted, and we associate that with a good metabolism, but actually we just never sat still.
Fast forward to now in college and let's say playing sports and walking everywhere and eating whatever you want. Yeah, because again, very active.
These are the things you think about when you've been doing this a long time, but I think of, the freshman 15 is a big thing. So what changes from college? Most of the people that I know that go to college, they no longer walk to class, they drive, right? Now they're going out drinking on the weekends. Little things like that add up quickly. It's not your metabolism. Like I always say, there's no stubborn metabolisms. There are only stubborn people.
Yeah, I guess that's the other end of the spectrum, right? Because we also then, I'm sure I've heard from many people over the years who didn't experience the freshman 15 because they were very active. But once they got out of college, that's when the weight started piling on because they didn't understand that their appetite didn't care that they weren't burning 10,000 calories a week just in their sports.
Yeah, you really get comfortable with your diet and then you change, the same thing with people that go into the military and come out of the military. They put on fat very quickly because they're no longer doing their performance tests. Unless they keep up with that activity, the foods that they were eating are now going to put them in a surplus. So, these are the things that we don't necessarily think about when we're looking at our overall goals because it's been so easy for so long that we don't understand it. And, you don't usually gain 15 pounds in a week. It's like a pound a month, 2 pounds a month. What do they say that after 40, the average, guy is gaining a couple pounds per year, 3-4 pounds per year. That's almost impossible to notice. You're going from a size 32 to a size 34 jeans. No big deal. Next year, it's a 34 to a 36. No big deal. Within 5 years, you're at a 40 gene and you're like, hold up. Okay, let me get this off real quick. Let me get it off in 6 months. Well, you just spent 5 years putting it on. It's going to take a little time.
And, research shows that many people, they gain most of the weight that they gain on weekends and holidays. So a lot of people, they just kind of maintain their weight throughout the week, eating well, right? And that's what they remember. Like, I just don't see how this happened because I eat well. It's like maintenance throughout the week. And then they get a little bit fatter on the weekends by eating too much food, drinking alcohol. And then you have the holiday periods, which are the weekends on steroids, to use a relevant cliche. So then they gain all this additional weight during the holidays, and maybe they lose a little bit after, but not all of it. And they just rinse and repeat that process over the course of many years. And one day they don't recognize what they see in the picture, or they're horrified by what they see in the picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a gradual slope. And there's a lot of reasons why we gain body fat, whether it's like moving less, eating more through, one of the things that I've noticed is that I'm old enough now at 47 to remember like going to a store and I wasn't checking out and there was 1,000 snacks and 1,000 sodas at why do they have snacks and sodas at the auto parts store? At literally every store you go to, you are bombarded. And so many times I'm like, oh, combos sound good. Oh, a soda sounds good. And I'm like, what am I doing? We're bombarded with snacking. Instead of making sugar the problem, maybe snacking is the problem, but that's just me.
I suspect that apples wouldn't sell as well. Apples and water.
Yeah. Oh, I love when I see like the gas station has bananas by the thing, like fruit to me is like a magical source of food because not only does it come in a package, like an apple and a banana is like in a package, you can eat the package, maybe not the banana, but.
And also, if you eat less sugar, fruit gets more delicious.
Oh, it's very sweet. Because I've been dieting for a little while now and I bought some cashews the other day. I love cashews. And I was eating them and I'm like, man, these taste really sweet. And I was like, oh man, I've been dieting for too long if cashews taste sweet to me.
That's funny. All right, last question. If you can just give a quick hit on it. And that is busy parents. As a parent, I don't know how many kids you have, but it's multiple. So it sounds like it's
3 now.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, it sounds more than 2. I'm sure you've heard from many people, especially new parents who now are not sleeping the way that they are used to sleeping. Their routine is all screwed up. Any advice for parents in particular?
Yeah, so if I'm working with someone who's a parent, I'll tell you the thing that most successful parents do. I guess it could apply even if you're not a parent, but if you're a parent, you have to do this. I get up before anybody in my house and I get 80% of my work done, right? I get up, I do my cardio, I make my first meal. So I've already gotten so much done by the time my kids get up. All I got to do is go to the gym and eat a couple meals, right? And so my time is their time. Before I had kids, I was a night owl. I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning. I would sleep till 8 or 9, maybe even 10, but I had the whole day to myself. My kids are up at 7, bed at 8. Like that's their window. So if I want to see them, I've got to be available in those hours. And, sleeping until 10 when my kids get up at 7, for most people, that's not going to be possible. My wife and I, definitely share duties there a lot of the time. She takes on the majority of the burden, but I don't want to be sleeping for 2, 3 hours of their day, especially in the morning when they're happiest. Like they're great kids in the morning, So like I love spending those morning times with them. So when I'm talking to a parent, I'm like, I know people that get up at 4 in the morning, they go to the gym, they do their workout, they come home, they eat, they'll do a little cardio, they'll practice their posing. It's 7 o'clock, their kids are getting up and they've already had all their stuff done. That is a very empowering thing, and even to like my business stuff, I like to get a lot of stuff done, work caught up so that I can enjoy that time and not be sitting there with them thinking like, oh man, I got to get to work. Oh, I've got to do my cardio. When am I going to talk to this person? When am I going to do this podcast? Right. So getting a lot of that stuff done and out of the way is the biggest thing. Meal planning. I always say this, busiest people are the people that are the most successful because they've learned how to be busy and still get shit done. A lot of the people that I coach are parents, business owners, they play guitar, they play in a volleyball league, and they still have time for bodybuilding, right? Like they get it all in because they've learned how to get things done. And I think first thing in the morning, you're not getting text messages, you're not getting phone calls, hopefully, so that would be the biggest hack for busy people is just learn to get up. You don't have to be 4 in the morning, but just find that window that works for you.
Yeah, great tip. And for people with newborns or where, again, the beginning phase when you are not getting much good sleep, what do you tell those people?
Yeah, so when my kids were born, I'll be honest, that was for them. That's their time. I'm not trying to be fit. I'm not trying to lose weight. That first 6 months, it's all hands on deck. Like they sleep for a couple hours at a time. They're very needy, but it's also the time that you really bond with them. So I'll encourage my clients, listen, we're not dieting for a bodybuilding show or trying to, put on a significant amount of muscle and sleep and all that. Focus on your kids. Focus on the family until you can get into a good routine, till you get to that phase where they're sleeping through the night and you can have a semblance of a daily routine that works for you. Listen, if you can afford nannies and night nurses and those things, great. But Most of us can't do that. Me and my wife, we literally didn't see each other the first 6 months my son was born, my first son, because she would do the day shift. I would do the night shift. I would try to get some work done. She would try to get some work done. But it was, so yeah, I mean, it's also about, like I said, harmony, because there's no balance. The first 6 months of a kid's life, there's not that balance. Now, my kids are in bed 7, 8 o'clock. They get up at 7 o'clock, so I've got a little time with the wife at the end of the day. The 5 a.m. shift is for me. The middle of the day is for my clients and my business. And then, there's a couple hours that are for the kids in there. But yeah, I think you got to be realistic. Like, don't be an asshole. Be there for your kids.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. That's what I tell people is that, hey, if you can sneak in one strength training workout per week, if that works out, you've slept and logistically that's okay. You can get away for an hour. Go do that. Go do a full body. Just do a couple compound exercises. If you're really lucky and you can get in 2 workouts, okay, great. Do that. But just think at best, just trying to maintain, just keep what you got and focus on getting sleep, focus on taking care of your kids, on taking care of your relationship. There will be a time in the future when you can get back to making your fitness or your physique a priority, but I would not do it now. That's usually what I tell them.
Yeah, especially with COVID, a lot of people started making their home gyms a priority, right? A lot of people learned like, okay, I don't need 30,000 square feet to get and stay in shape.
All I had some bands. I had some adjustable dumbbells. I had a dip station, and I couldn't set up a pull-up bar because of the house I was in. It would mess up the molding above the doors. And so I was doing pull-ups. There was a mechanical room in the basements. This is Virginia, where everyone has basements. And there was an I-beam, like a structural I-beam that was exposed. And I would do my pull-ups on the I-beam just because I could, whatever, it worked. And that's all I had. I looked great by the end of COVID. I think I lost 8 pounds, didn't lose any muscle.
I got really lucky. I built a new building at my house, a separate office with a 2-car garage. And the 2-car garage, while it was a 2-car garage, it was 100% a gym. Right when COVID hit, that finished. So I had actually a lot of my friends and employees come into my house to work out for like those couple months. So yeah, I got very lucky because it became impossible to find gym equipment at the beginning of that.
Yeah, I went looking too late. So I had what I had. I was like, well, whatever, I'll make do.
People made a fortune selling gym equipment during that time.
Yep. Anyways, we've run over, so I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you again for doing this. Is there anything left, though, that you wanted to share? Anything I should have asked that we didn't touch on before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we covered it all. I mean, when I just think about a lifestyle and, trying to get fit, I think don't put the pressure on yourself of being perfect, and don't put the pressure on yourself of you have to do something. Like, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to do cardio. You can go for a walk in your neighborhood. You can just find things that you enjoy and do that. I had one client lose a ton of weight because he started doing jujitsu, and then he started going 3-4 days a week. Don't look at it like this is how you lose weight. There's no one formula. So find what really speaks to you. Like, as much as I love bodybuilding, I don't think it's for everybody. I know people that like, I hate working out, and I'm like, that blows my mind. But then I see them working on the carburetor for their motorcycle for fucking 3 months. And I'm like, that would drive me nuts. I'm just going to go buy a new motorcycle, right? But that's their thing. So find your thing that makes you want to do more stuff. Hit a softball, hit a golf ball, frisbee golf, whatever is in movement that you can do. My wife is doing tennis now and she loves it. She gets lessons. And so I'm going to have to actually start playing tennis now. But that's my overarching theme is like
tennis and not pickleball, huh? She's bucking the trend.
She likes to move. Like, she hates doubles in tennis. She wants to run back and forth. My wife was an athlete in college. She was on the track team at FSU. So she likes to move, and we're still youngish, like we can still do it. So I think pickleball in the future, probably, because I was watching them play the other day and I'm like,
a lot of young people. I wasn't saying that as like a...
No, I'm like, I would dominate.
I see a lot of young people playing it as well, just because it's like a little bit more activity than table tennis, and it's easier than tennis.
Yeah, I mean, a tennis is just such a fun activity. There's just, I live in a neighborhood with we have a tennis club with the true clay courts. They're just really nice. So, and we have instructors here. So they have ball machines. So we can go, obviously it's what's accessible to you. I think the nice thing about pickleball is that you don't need like all this stuff. They have these like little portable nets, tape off the box, and you got like a paddle and a ball. Tennis, you obviously have to have a considerable amount more stuff. But yeah, find that thing that just gets you out the house and gets you doing something.
Yeah. Great advice. Let's end with that. And why don't we just tell people, if you want to let people know, where can they find you, find your work? Obviously, you mentioned you have a coaching services. If there's anything else in particular you want people to know about, let's tell them.
Yeah, the big things for me are I do YouTube. I also do a transformation challenge twice a year. We do one in January, February, and then we do one in the fall, right around August. And then we have our own podcasts. I have to have you on there sometime called the ProPhysique Code. We have guest hosts all the time. So we have, among our staff of coaches, we have people with master's degrees, mental health specialists. We have a bunch of different topics on there. We talk about contest prep, but we also talk about busy mom life, right? So we try to have a wide array of topics. But that's it. I mean, I'm the same as you. I'm just trying to get out good information for people that want to change their life in this world of over informative platforms that just, you almost feel like confusion, and you have to find your tribe or your community that helps you focus and reach your goals. And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. And you're on social media as well, if people want to find you.
Yeah, Instagram. And, you heard it here first. I'm starting TikTok, but it's a big learning curve. But yeah, so mostly Instagram and YouTube. Those are my bread and butter.
Cool. Well, thanks again for doing this. This was great.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Well, I hope you liked this episode. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, subscribe to the show because it makes sure that you don't miss new episodes. And it also helps me because it increases the rankings of the show a little bit, which of course then makes it a little bit more easily found by other people who may like it just as much as you. And if you didn't like something about this episode or about the show in general, or if you have ideas or suggestions or just feedback to share, shoot me an email, mike@muscleforlife.com, muscleforlife.com, and let me know what I could do better, or just what your thoughts are about maybe what you'd like to see me do in the future. I read everything myself. I'm always looking for new ideas and constructive feedback. So thanks again for listening to this episode, and I hope to hear from you soon.